some stats are important that no Forest play. Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.
10 changes, sloppy passing, moments of magic, chances galore missed, and a capitulation right out of the Nottingham Forest playbook after building up a 2-0 lead in the Carabao Cup against Championship side Swansea, and then missing a host of excellent chances to put the game to bed. Was it Ange-ball that is to blame for losing the match, or do we need to look at the complacency of the players? Maybe it's a bit of both. So, with plenty to look back on from last night's disappointment, we're also going to blend that into focusing on the trip away to Burnley on Saturday. I'm your host, Greg Oram. He is Richard Spray. And with us on the panel, it's Hertfordshire Pundit and the Statman, Danscape. So, loads of packing, guys. No time for any long intros today. We're going to get straight into it because time is against us and we want to get chatting about all the nitty-gritty of it. If you're with us in the comments, please do play along. That means let us know your thoughts. There's going to be loads of wild, differing opinions on Morgan Gibbs-White, Ryan Yates, Willy Bolly, the goalkeeper, left, right and centre, up, down, middle and otherwise. So let us know what you think. Like and subscribe, please, if you can. And follow us on all your socials as well. Okay, so match thoughts from all. We're going to go around and get some match thoughts from all of you guys. But also, whilst you're kind of like giving me what you thought overall, I'd like you guys to kind of mention your thoughts on team selection. We saw 10 changes. Was that the right call as far as you're concerned? Do you think that maybe it was too many? Or, you know, Ange said he'd be making changes and he did just that. So, Richard, I'll come to you first. Let's have your overriding view on what you saw last night.
Well, I think it's that change curve scenario, right? We're in the depressed state right now, but what I think that means is that we're going to come out of it. And I think if you looked at the first 80 to 85 minutes of the match in isolation, you probably would have been a little frustrated, clearly, with certain moments of the match. But then you would have also been very pleased by the fact that Igor Jesus, a guy that we question, has he got the finishing capability? Finished twice, and he did it well. So there's certainly definitely positive things to take from this. I know it's hard to think that at the given moment, given that we lost, but I'm generally in the Paul Morley camp. I'm in the sort of pragmatic, level-headed. Things are going to get better. This is a team in transition in terms of, like I said, in terms of moving to a different style, moving to a different leadership and culture. But it'll get there because we've got some very quality players, and I think that was on display last night with performances from Bakwa, Hutchinson, Douglas Luiz, etc. There was definitely things to be positive about moving forward. So I'm not going to sit and dwell on something that I think honestly was an exception. And I don't think this is what we're going to see from the club moving forward. At least I hope not. Confident it won't be anyway. And in terms of the selection, I'm not gonna do a hindsight scenario where I suddenly start questioning, Willy Bolly, Ryan Yates. Those are the ones that I know people are fixating on, or Morgan Gibbs-White coming in the second half. Because as we said, the guy needs to play better, and we know he's capable of more. So I'm going to stick with my guns that I think he did the right thing in giving these guys minutes, because we need to see what kind of quality we have. We need to see them play together. As I always say, when there's live ammunition, when you're actually in a match scenario, not on the training ground where that you can only replicate so much. And so getting that live ammunition is good for some of these young players as well. Being able to acclimate for some other players who have not played in the Premier League, like a Safona, for example. Those are the kinds of things, or Douglas Luiz coming back to the Premier League. You need to see them start to acclimate because they're going to be critical for us moving forward. And in the end, you know what? It's the Carabao Cup. Would have been great to win it, but you know what? It's one less match series to worry about, one less stress on our depth chart. So I'm just gonna move forward in a bit better headspace.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Steph is with us in the comments with a $4.99, a $5 donation. She said, "Morning, guys. Trying to be positive. I think we just need more time for the system to click." You could be right, Steph. Thank you so much for putting some money in the pot. Also, good morning to Brucey over in Texas. He says, my thoughts. Well, yeah, we do know, but I want you to share them because outside of the WhatsApp group, people won't know your thoughts. And Dr. Anna says, "Hi, guys. Good to see the OGs on today. She's asking you, Dan, how you're feeling and hoping that you're coping with the social media pylon for your hero. I'm coming to you next, Dan. I want to quickly say that from the very off, as the game kicked off, it's kind of set the tone with the ball going back to Ryan Yates and a terrible pass to Douglas Luiz. And all of a sudden, the ball was turned over within 3 seconds. And then for the next 5-6 minutes, it was all Swansea. They were kind of coming on top of us. And I felt sloppy, fragmented first half passing and, really kind of struggling to get into it. And then we see it click together a bit more. So, I was feeling pretty good as the kind of half progressed. I mean, and obviously we saw the Igor Jesus goals, which we'll talk more about. But yeah, and Dr. Anna's asking the question, Dan, how are you? And, is there any way back for Willy Bolly?
Look, I'm not too bad. Obviously, the way the game unfolds, you're going to be depressed after that. I don't. In your initial comments, you said about is it the players, is it the manager? It's kind of neither. It's the situation we're in. At the end of the day, we've kind of ended up in this situation for whatever reasons. We can go into that, but we're that was our last pre-season game almost. Like that's where we are. He's having to experiment. He's having to try things out. Players are coming in that are rusty because they haven't played minutes. Players are playing together who've got like 4 new, relationships to build around them. So it's going to look like that. And if you've got chaos off the pitch, you're probably going to get chaos on the pitch, and that's what ended up happening at the end of the game. I think that's where we are as a team, and it's the job now is for Ange to plot some kind of way through this to start just putting points on the board. And I suppose the concern is going to be whether some of those backup players like Bolly and Yates have to get involved. Can they shake off all the rust and get up to the level, and also what we now need to do from the change in style that Ange wants to actually move us forward. Because we can talk about, philosophies and styles and all that. But at the end of the day, if you're 5 yards out and you don't score, and if you're 5 yards out and you don't win your header, you're gonna lose games, aren't you? Whatever your style is.
Now then, Raf, you couldn't see the game last night, and you have watched it back like this morning. So you kind of know the score. Yeah, so you're kind of coming into it with knowing all the fallout, but then almost looking at it. I don't know. Maybe you disagree. I kind of almost felt like you looked at it in quite an objective way. So I know what's coming. I know that we lost this game. So I'm going to look at this completely objectively. And I know you've got maybe a more positive slant to put on things.
Yeah, I definitely do. I don't understand the Yates hate watch. I actually thought that was one of the better games that he had. Yeah, he gave the ball away a couple of times, but he was trying to be progressive with it. He box crashed a lot more than I've seen him do recently. I thought he was actually really, really good. I don't get the Callum Hudson-Odoi hate. He was actually linking up really well with a lot of the other players and managed to get shots away and was close with some actual saves. He was the one challenging the keeper who was having to make saves. Bolly's just been thrown in. He's not up to speed. It is harsh. But yeah, there has to be something going along. I put none of this on Ange at all. And I actually think with 11 players, and you can't really count Morato as first string, 11 backup players, all slung together, all playing together for the first time in a competitive match and probably been playing together for less than a week. And we smashed Swansea for 90 minutes. Other than the first 5 minutes, we smashed them. Basically, we should have scored 7 goals at least. And I think this is very much the Paul Morley camp of you replay that game 99 times and we win it.
100% we do, but we didn't. And so therefore, the emotiveness of being a football fan kind of takes over a little bit, Richard. And we're all guilty of that, me probably more than many. So we're going to try and remain as balanced as we possibly can. And those watching and listening, it's just an individual opinion. And that's what we want here on Talking Reds, is individuals to have their opinion, but you guys in the comments to get in touch and let us know what you think as well. We had a first look at Douglas Luiz, Richard, finally getting a start. Also, Alexander Zinchenko. I think 2 positives to take away from the match. How did you see their performances?
Oh, I agree. I thought Zinchenko did what Zinchenko does. He played, if you look at his pitch positioning, he was moving kind of into that inverted role and hanging out in the midfield quite a bit, right, up near the middle of the pitch, and kind of servicing it to the rest of those guys on the left hand side. But I thought he played really well. I didn't see any. Maybe I'm just forgetting because I haven't gone and watched back the full match yet, and I plan on doing that just to look at specific performances. But I would say that I think he fared well in his first match in some time. I thought Douglas Luiz looked really adept in the ball. I thought there were some nice turns that he made, crisp passing. I mean, he had that beautiful ball inside the box to McAtee, which unfortunately he couldn't finish, and that happened a couple of times, as we know. And but it was that nice link-up play in tight spaces that you saw from him. So the quality is there. I think we're going to get a really good player in him, and I'm excited to see what we get. I understand he doesn't kind of fit. It kind of creates a bit of a different sort of look and feel and way that you approach it tactically when you don't have a true six in there, as it relates to Douglas Luiz. If you play him with Anderson we know can play multiple positions, but it's just, I was very, very excited about what is to come. I think that's my biggest takeaway, as you pointed out, Greg, from this entire match, was what is ahead of us from my perspective in terms of what we have to utilize and the tools that Ange has to utilize, because there's some real quality players in that second level of our team. And it'll be interesting to see how he starts to deploy those, if he thinks they give you a bit of an edge, moving forward in different matches such as Burnley.
So sticking with the first half at the moment, then we've got off to a not a great start, but we started to see flashes of passing, didn't we, Danscape, with players trying different things. I mean, as the half progressed, I'm thinking about maybe before we scored. Were you starting to see maybe green shoots of, like, I know that we're effectively playing a brand new team and lots of players getting first minutes. Douglas Luiz, Hutchinson getting a run out for the first time, McAtee getting a start and so on. So were you kind of feeling quite happy as the half progressed, and then take us into the first goal as well, with that move that saw Igor Jesus get off the mark?
Yeah, I suppose we struggled early on, and then I thought Swansea kind of played into our hands a little bit in that they gave us more time, and that really helped us get Zinchenko on the ball. And he looked good, in possession. I've got absolutely no doubt.
Can I just ask you about him? How happy are you with him inverting that we know he would do it, as opposed to overlapping? Yeah, so in a game like that, you need it. The whole point is that you want him on the ball, because you are going to get more of the ball, and you're going to have to play those passes. Some of his passes into the penalty box that were cutting through, and the likes of Luiz or I guess Hutchinson were getting on the end of. It's kind of like, that's exactly what you want. That's the benefit. And we might need that against Burnley, because they will also probably sit in. My question marks around Zinchenko is when we play Liverpool or Arsenal or something, and we're defending for 80% of the game. But in that kind of game, perfect, and it was good to see. Douglas Luiz did well. I thought he had, again, shaky 5 minutes, gets on the ball and helps us control the ball a little bit. And then Bakwa was the guy, wasn't he? He was the guy who unlocked the game. Up until his moment of real juicy skill, we did struggle to create much, and that suddenly unlocked us. And you could see, what he can bring just by skipping past a couple of players and opening the pitch up, which is what we need. So, the first goal was good. I like Igor Jesus getting up from his tackle and getting on the end of that. I fancied him for goals yesterday, because I think if you have Bakwa and Hutchinson, they're going to feed him, and he's going to thrive in that kind of game. So it's good to see him just make the finishes he needed to do. And we should have been 3-0 up at half time, shouldn't we, with that McAtee chance as well, which would have been perfect. The game would have, in theory, been done then. I really hope it would have. And like Raf says, we dominated them. We got chances. We just didn't do the basics in the end. I think it's about moments. I mean, it's an obvious thing to say, but you're right. Up until Back was skipping down the right-hand side and cutting in and then chopping it back from McAtee, we'd kind of struggled to get going. And it's almost like there was a collective kind of, okay, all right, Back was arrived. Let's all up our game. And everything started to come together much more. So we got the goal for Igor Jesus, and I thought he finished it really well. And I was impressed with Igor Jesus. From the start, I thought he looked lively, and he's good on the ball. So I liked him. I was also happy with Hutchinson's effort. Now, there's been a lot talked about Amari Hutchinson. We're being left out the Europa squad and how much we paid for him. He is still a young player. We have to remember that. But I was pleased with his input, and he had a go, Raf, or a say, or a part in both goals. The second goal that come across from that delicious move, it would have been very easy for Hutchinson to try and take an extra touch and score himself, but intelligent play, popped it back to Igor Jesus 2-0. So, what are your thoughts on Hutch and McAtee? Because I kind of thought maybe McAtee was looking a little bit off the ball at times. So, Hutch and McAtee for you, Raf, and also interesting to get your thoughts, Raf, on the goalkeeper, because he was giving me a heart attack every time the ball was going back to him. He wanted to take too long, and I was waiting for it to happen. So, what are your thoughts on John as well?
Okay, I'm going to start with John. All right, and I think that we all have Turner PTSD, right? John, for me, was not at fault other than for one ball spill out that when he was supposed to catch it, and he spilled it in front of him and no one was there, right? But it was pissing down with rain as well, right? So the ball was quite greasy. The rest of the time, he was getting balls back to him on a greasy pitch in very tight situations. And I actually think he's highly confident. He knows how much time he's got and he gets the ball away. He didn't screw up. It was very tight a lot of the time, but he didn't screw up at all, right? And so from my perspective, I actually have no qualms with him. I think he's fresh from the confidence of his excellent performances at the Club World Cup. And I actually think that he is a very able number two. And I actually don't worry about that from that performance from him. When it comes to Hutch, between the podcast war, prediction wars that we've got going on and my kind of one-liners, I've actually said I think Hutchinson's going to be very important for us this season. And I think we've just seen the first indication of why we bought him for that amount of money. He was absolutely brilliant. And what he does, and I love Callum Hudson-Odoi, but when Hutchinson's thinking and he's got the fullback, he's moving with speed towards the fullback while he's thinking. He's not standing on the ball and shimmying left or right. He's actually progressing into the box while he's doing it. And he's doing everything with speed. The cutback shows intelligence and awareness. And actually, this is the confidence boost that he needs, that he came out of the under-21 competition and grew into that competition. And I think he's the player who just needs to play and the confidence comes. And I think we've seen the start of that today, which is great. The McAtee hate I've seen there as well. I was waiting for it to see what he did massively wrong. It's the finishing. He can finish about as well as Morgan Gibbs-White, basically. So that's the issue that we've got. But the rest of his play, really intelligent balls, his movement off the ball, exceptional. He could have put the first goal away, but he actually left it for Jesus to pop in. And he was getting in the box on the end of stuff. He was linking stuff, intricate balls that were through. We're seeing a really excellent player in McAtee right there. Him and a number of players need to find a finishing coach and just spend 2 days with a finishing coach to figure that piece out.
Okay. So I want to come back to Willy Boly, and this is only because he was the Forest player involved in their penalty shout, and it wasn't given. And I think that we were kind of chatting in our group that said, look, I think if the VAR was there and present, they'd go with the on-field decision, probably not overturn it. If it had been given, the same thing, it would have stood. Referee chose not to give it. What was your view, Richard? Was Boly kind of caught a little bit by their tricky winger in that moment, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. They had a couple of tricky wingers, didn't they? So, yeah, it definitely looked like it. I mean, in the initial, from a distance in real time, it looked like just a very physical play, and that maybe just a smaller player got muscled off the ball, and so that's why I thought it didn't look like much after that. But until you actually zoomed in, saw it, he didn't really get much of the ball, and he got quite a lot of his legs. So that was one moment that we're grateful didn't play out in the opposite. Go the opposite direction. But as a general whole, I think that goal that Burgess scored on the header off the corner, the first goal, I got sort of shades of when I played tennis in high school. And I used to have John Schinberger, my coach, yelling at me, "Spray, no man's land," because I would just get kind of in my own head. And then they would, do a little drop shot or something would happen. And I'm in that in-between space where I'm just not quite engaged. And that's felt like what happened to him in that moment. I'm not saying that's a good thing. Clearly, that's not a good thing because it led to a goal. He kind of, switched off a little bit, which can happen, obviously, if you're not playing, sound in terms of what area or what man you're marking. But, that was a bit casual. So that was disappointing to see from a guy who's got a lot of experience and probably 9 times out of 10 would never do that. But I felt like that's this match in isolation. Like you said, Raf, or Paul said, 9 times out of 10, we don't lose that match. Just happened to be the one time last night that we did. So it kind of felt very eerily similar with Bolly's play at certain intervals. But I think overall, he did what Willy Bolly does, right? He looked pretty sound. It's just, unfortunately, those other moments were glaring.
We will talk about those as well. Richard Ottaway in the comments says he thinks David Carmo would have been better having not let him go back out on loan. And it looks like we're going to be very reliant on Murillo. Question to you guys. And I've kind of thought, is this a recruitment failure? Because I'm worried about Morato and Willy Bolly being the next off the ramp. If we lose Milenkovic and Murillo or both, we've already lost Murillo for this game, and we think he's back on Saturday. But if he's not, we've got to put one of those in. And actually, I don't think I'd be very comfortable or very happy if I've got to start Willy Bolly in a Premier League match or in a Europa match, and he's back up. That's the depth right there. That's how I see it. And I see Willy Bolly as the player that he's been for us for the last 2 years, which is a closer, minutes off the bench and so on. There's my door. I'll go and answer that. Richie, I'll come to you in a sec. But Dan, I know you're the Willy Bolly man. Is that a failure in recruitment? Should we have strengthened better?
Possibly. Yeah, I mean, it does feel like it's just a slight little bit too much of a drop-off, potentially, for me, in that level. But we've got the bodies. It's just they're in that zone of being either a little bit young or a little bit, too experienced, shall we say, to be friendly, because they're not old, are they, by any stretch compared to us lot? But it's like they're just in that zone of there. I mean, look, Morato, I think in certain games will suit how we play under Ange, but there, a game like Burnley, where potentially they go a bit direct, is where he might struggle, and that's where perhaps Bolly might do a better job if you need to bring someone in. But it's not the most impressive area of our squad depth, certainly. Is it a failure in recruitment? I mean, look, the defense as a whole didn't get a great deal of the money spent, did it? We went to town on the wingers and the strikers. Centre mid and defence was kind of a little bit further down that list in where we spent the money, and obviously our previous manager perhaps tried to flag that up, and so therefore I can't possibly say or I'll get sacked as well. Well,
you won't, but what I'm thinking, Raf, is that a failure to bring in a better, more experienced backup is where I'm at, because again, I'm just thinking of the fact that we might have to start Willy Bolly and Morato together again, because when hamstrings start going, and we've seen that happen. I don't think it's that bad. You're happy. But I think for me,
what I saw in that game. Not what I saw in that game.
1 second. I like Jay Cunha last night. For me, I think he's better on the ball than Morato. I would have him ahead of Morato, Jay Cunha. But I just worry that if we had to not have Milenkovic and Murillo starting, that we'd just come up a bit short. But you seem quite happy about it.
So I really do not rate Morato just because of his aerial ineptitude. Let's just call it that.
And reading of the game ineptitude as well.
No, in the game yesterday, he was actually weirdly quite good at that high line. He was raiding balls. He was intercepting things. He was actually running and carrying the ball forward as well in a couple of instances. He actually, I think that's probably one of the better games he had. And where things were going wrong, it wasn't him. Like, Morato didn't do anything wrong as far as I saw in that game yesterday. So I think, as Dan was saying, situationally, depending on the matchup of the game, if he's going to have to do everything in the air, you don't play him. If the ball's on the ground, actually, I think he started regaining a bit of his powers, and that might have done him some good that game, confidence-wise. Jay Cunha, within about 3 minutes of coming on, blocked a shot with a cheeky back heel, right? And I was just like, here we go. This is the new Murillo. And he carried the ball and was literally in the opposition box as well. So I think there's a competition to see which of the two of them can score, Murillo or Jay Cunha, who can score the first outfield goal, not from a set piece, basically. And I'm loving that. So I actually think Jay Cunha get some minutes under his belt, because remember, he doesn't actually play a super amount beforehand, right? And not at this level. Yesterday would have done him good. I think his trajectory is steep and really good. And Morato can be used in certain situations. I do think Bolly is just what he was there to be. He is the ultimate break glass when everyone else is injured. And we haven't even talked about Abbott yet.
We haven't. I mean, Pat Brett in the comments, Richard, says Bolly was not kept on to play. He was Nuno's man in the dressing room. And in a nutshell, that's my point made. If that's really what he was there to do, then what are we thinking? Because that's our depth there. If we're going to do that and keep him in the squad as a man in the changing room, then surely you bring in a more experienced defender, centre defender, to be your go-to guy. Because if Bolly is literally just the man in the dressing room, and obviously Nuno's gone now, he's now just a general squad player. That surely, that to me just doesn't make sense. I mean, what do you think, Rich?
Well, I think we're being a bit person of the moment. I'm sure that's the case for a lot of this match because that's just how it unfolded. I mean, if you had said, so name me a frailty and a significant moment in a previous match where he's played. I understand he didn't play a lot of minutes last season, but where he just seemed like he wasn't up for it, or as you quoted about McAtee, off the boil. I mean, most of the time he's one of the most steady players in that area of the pitch, and he's certainly the case on corners because his height and his physicality are great value when you're in that situation. I'm not saying that you can excuse what happened last night because historically he hasn't actually looked anywhere close to that, in my opinion. But so I realize it's a small sample size from last season, but in terms of the previous season and even just moments where he did come on last season, I thought he looked like Willy Bolly. He looked like a guy you could rely on. So I think we're getting a little fixated on this, and I understand why, given the circumstances and given that we all expected more from the club as a whole to this point. And so it's compounding effect of poor West Ham performance, good but not fantastic performance against, Crystal Palace prior to that. And then the stark contrast with Brentford, and then coupled with a loss that shouldn't happen against the Swansea club. That while they're okay, they're not, not world beaters by any means, and they're certainly not Premier League. So I get all that. I think we're getting a little bit too fixated on what happened right now versus what I think he can bring you in the future. I would not be worried about him coming back on and putting in a better performance.
And in fairness to Willy Bolly, when his first game for Forest, he had a little bit of a nightmare, actually. He got caught high and it wasn't great, but he came back in and readjusted and off he went. And if that's the case that we see that, then fine. Again, I'm just underlining that my worry is if he's got a start. I don't have any worry about him coming off the bench and being a closer. Dan, you mentioned earlier that maybe the Swansea game was our last pre-season friendly. I'm not quite sure if Ange played it that way. But, I mean, could we also say that last night's game was our first game in Europe? Because we had to go to Wales, and I'm hoping that the rest of the European trips don't turn out like that. Let's move on to the second half. The changes at half-time. We saw Igor Jesus go off, and we saw further changes happening, I think, 50, 60 minutes thereabouts. Douglas Luiz going off. Morgan Gibbs-White coming on. So instead of closing this out, we're 2-0 still. At that point, we've missed a couple of chances with more missed chances in the future to come. Nuno would have closed that out. He'd have managed the game differently. So Ange's philosophy is to score more goals. Is that the problem right there? In a nutshell, I know that you mentioned, well, it's maybe not on Ange, it's maybe not on the players, it's just the moment we're in right now. But Ange is the manager, and in that moment, his tactical decision was to bring those players on and go for more goals. And is that a sign of things to come?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think there is an element of him just wanting to see these players, together and get some more minutes into the legs and all that sort of stuff. But look, the halftime changes are fine. Although, we did look more solid with Morato on over Jer Cunha. I appreciate he was good on the ball and everything, but, a lot of defending is the stuff you don't see, isn't it? Positioning and closing spaces and stopping teams from getting the momentum. So we did look a little bit more shaky with Cunha on than when Morato was on, but that could also be down to the fact that Swansea played the game very well. They kept a couple of their starting players off to see if the game was close, can we chase it? And they implemented that well, and it kind of put more pressure on us. And the subdued question is the 60-minute one, bringing Gibbs-White on instead of Sangare at that point for Douglas Luiz, because that is, Douglas Luiz was playing quite a deep role. He was doing a job, mopping things up and intercepting, whereas Gibbs-White, we know it's not his strength. And it took a while for us to adjust. And obviously within about 5 minutes of that sub is when they scored the first goal, which obviously is, a set piece, not really from open play, but it then shifts the momentum, and you haven't got that extra body necessarily in midfield that you want to just shut the game down. So look, yeah, it was a decision Ange made, but I don't think he was doing it because he's like gung ho, we want more goals. I think he's just thinking about minutes and time and managing and seeing players and all of that. I don't think on this occasion that was what he did. However, it's another lesson, and it comes back to the fact that at some point you have to work out the best way to win the game as opposed to the best style of play or the best appearance on the pitch. It's got to be about how do we just see this out, read the narrative, read the room, read the atmosphere. Let's just see this one out and close it out. So hopefully in the future he does learn from that side of it. I didn't think Gibbs White was too bad when he came on. We created more, but we just didn't. Again, we didn't take the chances that we needed. And then when Sangare comes on, it's kind of like it's just a cup game at that point. They just scored a couple of goals out of the last goal is out of nothing, isn't it? And at that point, you can't suddenly base your whole season on that moment when it's a cup game.
No, you can't. And I think on the goals, Raf, the Swansea goals, I mean, we talked about Willy Bolly. I think he definitely has to be doing a lot better, but there were lots of other Forest players in that box that weren't doing anything either. And we talked about McAtee offline, kind of almost ducking under the ball. He's got to be doing better. I know he's not there to defend, but actually he is. He's a midfielder. He's in the box for a reason. Even if you're getting in the way of, make yourself, difficult to kind of get round. He didn't do any of that. But I want Bolly to be doing more. But once that goal's gone in, Raf, it's that moment again where it's almost like a collective, okay, they're back in this now. Even though we created more chances thereafter, was there any sniff in sight as far as you're concerned of what was to come?
Oh gosh, well, yeah, Rich, this is kind of like the old Forest versus new Forest, but I don't think it really is that. I just genuinely think it's just a collection of players that are all randomly on a pitch, and there's not that level of cohesion. And when you're under the pump, where is that drilled organization as a unit of all the different players that are there? Okay. And with the last goal, you've got a shot from even further out than the D that smashes up against the upright, right? So if that had gone in, that would have been a worldie of a goal that had gone in. It didn't. It hits the upright. It cannons all the way back. And then you've got their person who's running forwards, effectively reacts quicker than Savona, and then finishes well to notch it in. So it's not great in terms of that perspective. But just from the 75th to the 82nd minute, we should have scored 4 goals probably just in that space of time. So I think it's very much what Dan's saying. It's just cup tie situations where you might as well. It doesn't matter if you lose another goal. The other team's just going to throw everything at it to try and get back in the game. There's no goal difference to worry about. So I just think it's a slightly different mentality. And it just is what it is. And I'm actually feeling weirdly positive, even though, and I knew what was happening. It's probably because I knew we'd lost when I was watching the game back, and I didn't get the live deflation that everyone got and disbelief as that last goal went in. I'd already baked that in overnight. But looking at it objectively, like you said, Greg, I'm actually really positive off the back of this game of what are effectively some amazing performances from people that are going to be coming off the bench for us, replacing our first team that has got more cohesion to it, and an actual back line other than Aina that's coming back in.
Yep. Okay. In the comments, NFFC 2000 says, I wonder if Marinakis will be happy with 16th and an early Europa exit, because that's what we're getting. Well, that's one opinion. I don't think that's going to happen, but I understand that there's a lot of frustration out there at the moment. Jackie is right to say that she thinks Jay Cunha is off with Brazil soon, I think for the under 20. So he might be taken out of the equation. Richard Ottaway goes on to say that he thinks Cunha indirectly had a helping hand in their third goal with gifting the throw-in. Yeah. Maybe, if I'm honest, a bit harsh, I think, Richard. I think, there's lots still to do from that moment. Lots of play thereafter as well. I kind of felt like maybe the footballing gods had a hand in last night. I do like to use that phrase from time to time. It was just one of those games where I think Raf's right. There's loads of positives, Forest fans. Think about the chances that we miss. On another day, they get buried. And in terms of a second 11, it's interesting. And in our next kind of like chat, when we bring the Burnley conversation in, we're going to get the panel's thoughts on who staked a claim last night to get a start at Burnley, or certainly be featured quite heavily. So that's coming up in just a moment.
The Cheese Trader, based on Grape Lane in York, is a cheese lover's paradise. Home to some wonderful specialty cheeses, relishes and chutneys, and also with a fantastic street food menu. Try their loaded fries or posh cheese on toast. It'll be the best you've ever had. Owned by Forest fan Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader proudly sponsors Talking Reds. Quote Talking Reds every time to get 10% off your order. The Cheese Trader and Talking Reds, the perfect cheesy mix.
Alrighty, into part 2. We are travelling to Burnley on Saturday. So this is the third away game of the Ange regime, and we knew that it was away game central to start with. Going to Burnley, who put in a great performance, it has to be said, against Liverpool at home last week, and it was Hannibal's dodgy penalty in injury time or thereabouts that saw Salah steal the game for Liverpool. I mean, Burnley are going to be up for it. They defended it, looked to me like, two banks of four, really kind of hard to break down. And so, to your point, Danscape, I'd be interested to see if Zinchenko tries to penetrate with some of his forward passing, as well as maybe a Douglas Luiz if he comes into the equation. We are going to go through the team selection that we would want to see for Saturday. Also, knowing what we know about last night is going to kind of help govern our thoughts about Burnley. So general questions for the panel to be thinking about in this next section is, is this a must-win game now? Has the pressure been ramped up on Ange and Forest unnecessarily by it being a defeat? Or do we have to put the result to one side and say, you know what, there's so much positiveness to take from last night. Backquire, Igor Jesus getting his first goals, Zinchenko, Douglas Luiz. These are players that are going to have a say possibly on Saturday as well. So we are going to Burnley, and we're going to start off this section with this.
I hope anybody's not stupid enough to write us off.
Opposition preview with Raf the Random Pundit. Here we go.
Oh, thanks, guys. Right, so what we've got here is we've kind of now got a bit of a depth of games that have happened, so we can actually go back to kind of that format of looking of how they've been playing over the last couple of games, bit of form and that type of thing. So it's a bit of a hybrid. So give us some feedback as to what you like from these opposition previews, and I can always tweak it to give you what you like. So for Burnley, as you can see, what we've got is their form coming in. They've won one game. So they went loss, then a win, then loss, then loss. And that win, as you can see in the bottom right, was when they beat Sunderland. So they've got 3 points. They're in 17th. We're in 4 points with 15, right? But what in 15th. But what I would say is that they actually have got a few issues with some key injuries that they've got, which do present a bit of an opportunity. And we very well might see them employ a back three with wing backs against us. They may not, because again, against Man U, they had a back four. Against Liverpool, they had a back five. And actually, I think it'd be quite good insight as to how much they respect us as if they do a back four or a back five. So for those that are listening and not watching, 3 games ago against Sunderland, they played our usual formation under Nuno, which was a 4-2-3-1. They repeated that when they played Man U away. And then against Liverpool, they basically played a 5-4-1 or a kind of 3-6-1 if your wing backs are pushing on. So they have that of what Dan kind of was alluding to beforehand. They might go quite low block on us, even though they are going to be at home. So it's not entirely too sure how they'll play, but they probably will have Dubravka in goal. And then Ekdal, who's come out and actually been their standout defender. And because Roberts, who'd usually probably be prepared, has been injured all season, Esteve has come in, who I think is a bit of an FPL favourite, certainly for me and for other people. And they've kind of been the bedrock in their central defence. You can see Kyle Walker, and then you've got Hartman as their left back. And those are going to be their kind of either full-backs or wing-backs, depending on what they play. Now, for me, their standout player who makes everything tick, and again, it's that engine room bit, is Josh Cullen, who sits in the middle of their midfield. So he's one of those, as you can see from the yellow highlighting, for those that are watching, these are kind of the key players that we're going to have a little bit more of a look at. So Josh Cullen sitting in that midfield is definitely one of them. A big miss for them is Ugachukwu, the ex-Chelsea player. I think he's on loan with them, if I remember. I think last season. I can't remember. But he's actually been playing pretty well coming in. He does a job for them. He's injured, so they're going to have to replace into midfield someone they ordinarily wouldn't start. On the left-hand side, they've got Anthony, and he is very useful for them. And there's quite a lot of build-up that is going to come down their left, especially given the fact that their right attacking midfielder, Brun Larson, who is very good for them as well. He's got a 75% chance of playing, but he currently is kind of fighting his way back from injury. So if he is subbed in and you do have Tachuna who comes on, then I do think we'll see a lot more that's building down the left-hand side. Foster, their striker, moves around quite a lot. He can be quite tricky. For them, he is a key player as well. So that's kind of where we are. They're three key. They've got 4 injuries, but 3 are really key for them. So they're starting centre-back, starting central midfielder Ugachukwu, and also Brun Larson may or may not start for them. And he's pretty key for them on the right-hand side if he starts. So that's what I would say is that. So if we quickly move into then the next slide, which I can do. There we go. Yep. Okay, fine. So has that come up, guys? I'm trying to
we can see that.
Back. Brilliant. Okay, excellent. So what we can see is you've got Cullen, Anthony, and Foster. And so from this, you can see the fact that Cullen actually drifts around quite a lot. Am I still there?
Yeah, still there. Keep going.
Yep, still there. Sorry, my laptop just went. It's got a massive delay on it. Sorry, apologies for that. So Cullen is actually, he drifts around quite a lot, but does favour the left-hand side a little bit more, which when you can see how much Anthony hugs that wing, there's going to be a lot of pressure if Savona is playing right back again. And I do think that we'll see a lot of targeting of our left-hand side. So Savona will have to have a big game, or there might be another plan for if Nico moves over and we switch someone, I don't know, to left back. Again, if you have a look at the movement of Foster, who is their striker, you look at where he is, probably because actually Burnley are defending quite a lot in that low block. He's not, a lot of his positioning is in that middle third. But again, what you're seeing is he's on that left side of the field more than he is on the right side of the field. So by having a look at these key 3 players, I do think that there's going to be a lot of challenge down our right, their left. And that is what teams are going to be doing to us anyway until Aina comes back. If we very quickly look at the form of the 2 teams, none of our players are in particularly good form on either side, but even they have got 2 players, and that's your Josh Cullen and your Jaden Anthony. So again, they are their 2 form players, or on SofaScore have got averages of 7 or above. For us, it is literally just Ando. That is the only player that is playing up to scratch on our team at the moment. But what I would say is if you go down to about their top 8, we've got slightly higher average of our top 8 players of how they're playing rather than Burnley, but it's much of a muchness. I would say that the player ratings are about the same on both teams. So that's me in a bit of a nutshell of what they're all about.
Thank you, Raf. Really informative, really helpful. Helps us to kind of guide our thinking about team selection, which we'll get to in just a short moment. I kind of want to ask that question again to you, Richard. Who staked a claim to start versus Burnley? from last night, potentially. I mean, is it too simple to say that we're going to have Anderson back, Milenkovic back, Wood back, others, etc., so we should be okay against Burnley? What kind of test do you expect them to give us?
I think they're going to do what Palace did to us. I think they're going to do what teams have seen be effective against as we're transitioning to more possession-based style of play. I think they're going to sit back. That being the case, I think there's some things that Raf just mentioned, because when you do look at who scored, it says, that 47% of their attack comes on the left-hand side. So that puts us in a situation where if you deploy Nico over to the right, I think you're really going to see it's going to kind of play into our hands by having the better defender that we have at the fullback position on that side. But so that what Raf just showed us was excellent. Yeah, I think that's part of it. Having some sort of tried and tested players back in the squad, that we, especially on that back line, will make a big difference. Hopefully Murillo plays. I don't know what the percentages look like. Is he questionable? Is he doubtful? Is he likely to play? I haven't seen that recently. I'm sure Ange will touch on that potentially today in his press conference, right? So it'll be good to see if he's in, because if that's the case, that makes me feel a lot more confident about how we manage space in the box, because when he's there, the guy's a block machine, right? So an interception machine. So that's the kind of thing we need, because we've been lacking that significantly, clearly, as well as his capability on the ball and his passing capability and so forth. But I really like the idea of Bakwa. I think he's going to really become a difficult proposition for that back line of Burnley, because that's the kind of creativity you need. As Dan said, you need an edge. You need something to unlock when they do sit back and try to just defend us and then hit us on the counter. Plus, he can drop back and defend to help assist Nico on that side. So I think it plays well into having a player like Bakwa on the pitch. And we've already seen flashes of what capability he has and the way that he can stress a midfield and a backline area on an opposing defense. So I'm looking for him to start. I just don't see any reason why you wouldn't, unless you felt like, for whatever reason, you like the savvy and the sort of veteran presence of a Callum Hudson-Odoi on one side and the directness of Dan Ndoye on the other. But I would say Bakwa, to me, that's the guy you want to utilize to unlock.
Yeah, and I think the more he plays, the better he's going to get. You've got to play these guys and let them really kind of get accustomed to the English football. Robbie Adamson says in the comments he was very pleased and relieved to see at least a decent amount of time given to the new signings last night. He really thinks that Luis, backward, Jesus, Zinchenko need to start against Burnley, Dan and Doy on the left. Okay. We had a really good snapshot and insight into Burnley from Raf. Let's change gears slightly with this.
I'm a Statman.
Fazendo som, Pedrinha Moraes fazendo som, e Pedrinha Moraes fazendo som.
As ever at this point now, it's become a custom for me to mention Sergio, who is in the hospital, is his favourite part of the episode. I spoke to him this morning. He's hoping to tune in, but hopefully, if he's listening, Serge, we're still thinking of you, buddy, and we're still hoping that things are going to go your way. Over to you, Danscape.
Yeah, so I'm mainly just looking at our kind of form over time and trying to piece together sort of where we really are as a team and where we have been for a little while longer. And I always think back with this to that Liverpool home game where we drew 1-1, where we were all excited. It was a great game and a great battle. And, we then, since then, we've never quite hit the consistency levels that we had before that point. So I thought I'd have a look at the form and things since then. And one of the things that always stood out to me then was it was reported about this kind of like, Forest now feel like they're, in the elite. And there's that sense of disappointment that we've drawn with Liverpool, including among the hierarchy and all that sort of stuff. And it started to feel to me like, did we take that leap too soon? Did we start to put pressure on ourselves and expectation because we were in there at that point? So look, I've looked at a couple of stats over time. XG against being the one that in particular stands out to me, because what we built that first half of last season on was the defensive resolve. So what I've done here is just plot on the right-hand side of this chart is our XG against up to that Liverpool game for the start of the season. And the yellow line is the average from the Bournemouth game to the Liverpool game, right? And so we were giving away chances that were worth roughly a goal a game, which is sustainable. Yeah, you're going to give up chances for a goal a game, but you don't want to be getting towards 1.5, 2. Since that Liverpool game, it's gone up to 1.4, right? So it's it's 40%. We're giving away 40% more chances since then, up to the Arsenal game in the league. So something shifted there in our defensive resolve over that first sort of whatever it was, 19, 20 odd games, and the last 24, 25 odd games, whatever we've done. So that's obviously defensively. Possession wise, something also changed in that our average before and after that game went from being a 40% possession side to being a 45-ish% possession side. So again, was there a feeling that at that point we actually wanted to change and stop being our sort of complete low block selves and make that transition then? And we've just seen even more of a progression of that this season, but there was certainly a shift there. And then unfortunately, what that translates to though is the possession hasn't really meant anything in terms of our form. So our form leading up to that was like 1.95 points a game. And our form coming out of that is about 1.3 points a game. So we've dropped from being that top half form down to a lower mid form. And that's over a long, that's over like 24, 25 games. So I think it's something that, I just wonder whether that mentality shift kicked in then and we started to feel the pressure, and whether the pressure is a part of the issue. And obviously you've got Ange coming in and saying, we want to win things and it's all about style of play and all that. So, what is it? Is it pressure? Was it the fatigue of defending that way? Was it a deliberate thing of like, well, let's change our style of play? Was it that feeling of being elite? Was it the Dubai trip, the mystery Dubai trip that seemed to change everything? Or is it just because they don't serve Madri at the City Ground anymore? There's all sorts of theories going around. Could be any of those things. But I just think there's that turning point there that we need to think about. And, look, our form over the last 12 Premier League games, our form is 1 point per game, which is, just scraping up survival form. So some of this falls onto Nuno. Some of this obviously falls onto where we are now, but we have to start turning this around with points, not performances, because our performances aren't consistently bad, but it's about points. It's about getting clean sheets and picking up points game after game after game. That's kind of where we are. And then I just thought a quick look at Burnley in terms of some of their style of play. I think obviously, look, the defense score can't be right at 0%, to be honest. Something's gone wrong on my spreadsheet on that. But attacking wise, they don't offer much threat, right? They are a relegation threat inside. They are down there in that bottom 30% of teams when it comes to providing an attacking threat. They are a smash and grab team that you can see on that chart. The goalkeeper's been performing particularly well, which obviously helps when you're in their position, and they've been taking their chances and finishing. But their long balls score is like 84%, right? So that is what we're going to face. We're going to face a classic relegation style sort of team that's just looking to, cause you problems with long balls and that sort of stuff. And players wise, I think Raf mentioned Ekdal. He stands out 94% on that stopper score. And Hartman as well stands out as a bit of a marauding sort of, I think he's full back, is he? But the other players, again, in attack, midfield, they don't stand out. So we've got to go into this game believing that... there we go. That's right. Yeah, we've got to go into this game believing that our quality will shine through, right? But we've also got to go into it with some clear, simple game plan, not thinking that we're, going to suddenly start playing like Brazil.
Okay, clear, simple game plan needed. But the question that kind of is in my head is, it's a results industry, isn't it? It's about results, like you just said. It's about getting points on the board. And I worry that some of that gets forgotten in the way that Ange wants his teams to play. And I'm looking back at the Spurs situation last year. I was speaking to a Spurs fan last night at my son's football because there's lots of them there. And everyone wants to ask me, because they know I'm the Forest fan, what do you think of the Ange appointment? Their view is that it was time for him to go. They weren't happy at all with the 17th place finish. And they said, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get kamikaze football. You're going to get him abandoning all other things apart from his tunnel vision towards this style of play. And I kind of pushed back and said, I really think that anyone would surely want to learn from their mistakes and look back and evolve their style slightly, and maybe say that I want to take a lot of the good things I believe in, my principles, but I know that I need to be cautious. And it did show that he was cautious. That they felt like the Europa victory was a bit of a default win. They take it, they're happy with it, but they said the way we set up against Glint and Man United, we parked the bus against Frankfurt. and actually, yes, we're happy for the trophy. And I pushed back and said, look, I think a lot of us would take 17th in the division and that Europa League. But again, it's about where different clubs are and what their different beliefs are and so on. And us coming out of the Championship after 23 years and being in season 4 back in the Premier League off the back of a really promising season. And let's face it, guys, Nuno was supposed to be the manager, wasn't he, for this season? We know that. But we are where we are. So I'm hoping that, the style of play isn't the be all and end all. I'm hoping that we can start to get these results on the board. Is this a must win for the weekend? That's the question I want you guys to answer whilst we put this team together. So we are going to add the FOT mob to the screen now. There it is. Richard, I'm coming to you first. As we start to build our team, this is kind of a bit of like, what would you do? What do you want to see Ange do type thing? We'll start at the back. So on screen, you've got the team that played against Arsenal. It's not the team from last night. So what changes are you making, if any, Richard?
Well, yeah, I mean, the back line pretty much calls itself with the exception of Murado out of the left back position. I don't ever want to see that experiment again. Let's go with Zinchenko. Yeah. So Zinchenko at left back. You've got Williams at right back, Milenkovic, and hopefully Murillo. If it's not Murillo, I think you'd be tempted to put Jair in there, but I might go with Murado again just because of his experience. Anderson in his normal position. I'm going to say Douglas Luiz comes in for Sangare. I like what I saw last night. I know he's not a traditional, defensive midfielder by any stretch, but I think he could do a job, and I think he can play complementary football with Anderson. I would say in the sort of forward area on the left hand side, Hudson-Odoi. I'd put Dan N'Doye on the left, and I'd put Bakwa at the right. And I think keep Gibbs White, keep Chris Wood to start with in that match. You're tempted to bring in or Igor Jesus coming off of what you saw last night, but I think Woody's your guy, and I think Bakwa can cut in, and he can send a cross in, kind of a la Madueke style, into the box, and that only plays into the way Wood operates in that position as a striker. So I think Dan N'Doye on the opposite side to me is a good sort of foil to
Rich.
To Bakwa.
Just quickly on that side, are you worried about what Raf flagged up about the fact that they attack down that side, and we're playing a completely set of new relationships there with?
Yeah, I could see that being the case. I mean, maybe in some capacity. But Anderson tends to roam. But to your point, I mean, yeah, I could see that. But I think you've got a better. I think you've got a quicker, more capable defender on Bakwa, right? Who's played in that wing back role previously, and 100%. I understand that's more of a. And I think you've got coverage in that side, and then but I can see what you're saying, Dan. Yeah, it's kind of a unknown. Those are not guys who have played together very much, right? So it might be a bit of a challenge.
We're going to get individual talent aside. I'm thinking team wise.
Yeah, but I mean, Bakwa has been the right wing back, and we saw against Arsenal that he was taking his defensive duties, pretty seriously. And Nico for me has to play at right back. Bakwa for me has to start on the right wing, even if it's Dan N'Doye or over there. The relationship is still new, so I think it's backward time. Dan, I'll stick with you, Dan. I mean, obviously Richard's put out his team as Sells and goal. Zinchenko, Williams in the fullback area, Murillo, Milenkovic, and then Anderson with Douglas Luiz coming in, Dan N'Doye on the left, Bakwa on the right, Gibbs White in the 10, Chris Wood up top. So Dan, it sounds like you might do something different. Or not?
You know what? I probably would stick to. Look, it's Burnley away, right? I feel like Sangare is good enough to play that game. I think I would stick with his physical presence in this game. This is just my way of seeing things. I think relationships and teams matter more than individual talent at this point in time because these players are still settling in. So I would go with that. I'd actually be tempted to put Hudson-Odoi on the right wing because I think when he plays on the right wing, he brings us a bit of solidity. I think we've often switched that, when we've struggled in games because we do get broken down on the left, we've put Hudson-Odoi onto the right, and then N'Doye can come to life on the left. And I think Bakwa for me is a super sub. If we need to unlock the game, we bring him on at that point. Similarly, Murato could come on and play at left back if it's becoming more of a game where we're sitting into the box. But I would start with Zinchenko because I think that adds your midfield presence that you don't need from Sangare then potentially, if they sit off and give us the ball. So I think that's what I'd go with. And Chris Wood, I think he has to come back in from a point of view of, it's his old club, and hopefully that sees him pop up with a couple of goals. I think you're on mute, Greg.
I am on mute. I beg your pardon. He was left out last night, and he was left out for a reason, you'd think. So that possibly means he's going to start. Raf, over to you. I mean, is there anything you do differently in terms of formation or personnel?
Yeah, I just need to correct myself. I had a bit of a brain melt beforehand when I was saying Savona might then been playing right back. I totally forgot that we can actually now play Zinchenko. So apologies to everyone. So I think the back four sorts itself out. I'm actually Anderson Luiz. I saw enough of Luiz yesterday to go that he is just better than Sangaro from an all-round game and speed perspective. And he can also do those forward passes. I just think it's time we just get on with it. Gibbs White keeps, I actually liked what I saw from Gibbs White, and we're going to need him to unlock quite a few things. Wood keeps his place. It's just the two wingers. And I think that's where the debate comes in for me. I'm actually the only one I don't think I'm not starting Ndoye. I'm having Callum on the left. I'm having Bakwa on the right, because I both think that they can unlock defences better. And I'm even close to even giving Hutch a start after what he did over Callum Hudson-Odoi, potentially on the left. I really liked what he did yesterday. But for me, this is how I'd go.
Okay, thank you. So that's bringing Douglas Luiz in with Anderson, Hudson-Odoi on the left, Bakwa on the right, Gibbs White staying in the 10, and Chris Wood up top. Back four stays the same. And listen, there's not much else I can add to it, really, guys. I think you guys have kind of summed it all up perfectly. I'm not sure that Hutchinson would start. He played the full 90 last night. That doesn't mean anything necessarily. I think that he is off the bench. I'd like to see him come off the bench. For me, Bakwa, I'm with you, Richard Spray. I think Bakwa has to start on the right. I think that he is going to be the starting winger. And it's up to Hudson-Odoi and Dan Ndoye and Hutchinson to kind of like try and stake a claim for that starting spot on the left-hand side. And sure enough, we know that we're going to see Ange shuffling the pack. There's a trip away to Real Betis coming up next Wednesday. So, when you bring that into the equation, it could well be that he sees, I mean, again, I'm just guessing here, guys. He might see Dan Ndoye as a more of a European starter. I don't know, given his experience with Switzerland, given him playing in Europe last term. Maybe that comes into his thinking as well. I really, really don't know. One player that we haven't really talked about from last night or for this team is Cali Mwendo, who I think is a very good player, who I thought last night when he came on showed again that he has something to offer. I thought his goal wasn't offside as well. That's another thing we should mention. In the game last night, we could have gone and should have gone 3-0 up. I don't think that was offside. Richard, I know that you're quite fond of Cali Mwendo. Just a quick minute of your thoughts on him.
Yeah, I think there's just what he offers. I mean, it's not. It's kind of, you look at it from a spectrum's perspective, right? And so you've got Wood as a sort of traditional 9. Jesus is somewhere in between, and then you got Callum Mwendo, who's just quicker, more agile, more capable in those tight spaces and finding people. I mean, I thought that one moment where he cut in off of a pass, I think from McAtee on the right-hand side, and he cuts in. I think he should have just unloaded and shot the ball instead of trying to send it over to Callum Hudson-Odoi. I thought that was one pass too many. And so he shows flashes to me of someone that I don't know if you start him, because I think there's too much variance in terms of how he plays against how Wood plays. But I do think that if you bring him on when you're trying to get a little bit of, added dimension, I guess, for lack of a better word, or if you're playing sort of traditional center backs who are not quite as athletic maybe as some, you can utilize him, because I think he becomes very difficult for guys in those kinds of positions. So I think he offers that, like we said, that change up, but I don't know at this stage, and I can't even say based off of Jesus' performance last night that you can slot him over Jesus, but I definitely think there's going to be more that comes from him, and having that kind of ability off the bench to be able to score and to have good finishing. I mean, he didn't show it last night or previous matches that he's played, but I think it's there. We saw it in Ligue 1 last year.
Yeah, I'm going to put this back up again because I'm thinking, look, let me show this. If that's the team, and what's on there, guys, that can't see, is Zinchenko, Murillo, Milenkovic, Williams at the back, Anderson, Douglas Luiz in the midfield, Hudson-Odoi on the left, Gibbs White in the 10, Bakwa on the right, Wood up top. If that is the starting 11, the word that's being bandied around again is finishers. We've got finishers off the bench now. So we've got Dan Doyd to come in. We've got Hutchinson to come in. Cali Mwendo, Igor Jesus, James McAtee. There's 5, even without you making a defensive type switch, which you would imagine that you might need to potentially. But if you're chasing the game, or if you're trying to score goals in the game, if it's 0-0 with 15 minutes to go or so on, the options off the bench. And we've had a good look now at Hutchinson. We've had a good look at McAtee last night. Yeah, there's room for improvement, guys. But, they've had minutes in their legs in a Forest shirt, which I think is really, really important. And so I'm kind of going with Raf and thinking there's loads to be positive about. These guys in flashes, Hutchinson involved in goals last night, McAtee getting himself into position to score. Okay, put it over the bar, but, normally he would bury that. He was scoring goals for Man City. With Sangare still in the mix to kind of shore things up in the midfield. Ryan Yates will still be in the squad. You can bet your bottom dollar. And there will be time and there will be room for Ryan Yates to come off the bench and do Ryan Yates things. Burnley away might be that kind of game, guys. So I'm with Paul Morley in the comments when he says that we need to have one of the wingers on Saturday. I think Raf was saying the same thing. It's tough old-fashioned stadium. Kyle Walker is very experienced. 2 inexperienced Premier League wingers on the pitch isn't the way he would go. He's saying Callum Hudson-Odoi and Bakwa. And look, like I said, we have the options off the bench to mix things up. Jackie's asking the question just quickly before we finish. Has it been confirmed that Zinchenko can replace Olet in Europe yet? It looks like it's going to have to happen. I mean, why the club haven't come out and said straight away, that's what's happening. I mean, Ange alluded to the fact, well, we got time and we'll make a decision. It's like, well, Olet isn't coming back from injury anytime soon. So it's a head scratcher for me that the club haven't just put that to bed yet. But we are hoping that is something they do quickly, unless any of you got any ideas as to why they wouldn't have come out with that yet?
I think you can only do it once. So what they're thinking is, if Sod's Law, Zinchenko gets injured on Saturday, then all of a sudden you are more screwed. So why rush is what I think what the report was.
It's going to be a last minute move, as Dan says.
So, sorry, I just had something pop up on my other screen then. So you're saying that we might
if we did it today... No,
okay,
if we did it today
right,
and then Zinchenko got injured on Saturday, you can't then replace Zinchenko. So there's no point. There's no benefit rushing it.
I see. That makes perfect logic. There's also the argument as well that people might are saying, well, let's go and get Renan Lodi and get him in the squad and put him in the Europa, or let's go and get X, Y, and Z player. I think that ship is sailed, guys. I think that ultimately is going to be Zinchenko goes in. So let's keep our eyes out on that. Okay, right. I know that some of you don't like doing this, but I am going to go around and ask you for your score predictions for Burnley. And Richard Spray, I can see your eyebrows furrow, and you're thinking, not sure I want to do this. But I'm coming to you first. Score prediction for Saturday, please.
Oh gosh, we are due a clean sheet for the love. I think I want to see a 2-0 win. I think we've got it within us to do that. I think our defensive resolve is going to be there. I think there's, as Dan pointed out earlier, lessons learned, right, in terms of how we played since Bradford. And I think we're due a clean sheet. Having that man back between the sticks that we all can rely on, who's been absolutely fantastic for us. And we realize when he's not there, when Murillo's not there, how much we're missing when those players on the pitch are not on the pitch. So I think we're going to go 2-0. I'm going to go 2-0 Forest. Okay, I like your style. Danscape, over to you.
I think a lot of it rests on Murillo's fitness. I'm a lot more confident if he plays. That's probably the key selection, regardless of wingers and everything else. You've asked a few times, is it must win? I don't know if anyone's answered it for you. Obviously, it's not. It's not technically a must win, but Burnley and Sunderland back to back is 6 points that we should be putting on the board if we're serious about being a top half team this season. So we have to go there confident, but I just think we need to set aside principles and style of play and just try and get a clean sheet. Let's try and just win it 2-0. 2-1's fine if it ends up being that, but we just need to find a way to win the game. And what worries me is the nerves and the mentality, isn't it? If you concede that goal, you've got to get back to that point of being confident you're not going to concede another one.
I've flashed some scores up on the screen and I'll put Brucey's back up again. Brucey, is that you saying Forest 1, Burnley 2, and that's a loss for Forest? Can you please confirm while I go to Raf?
1-0 Forest.
And there we go. 1-0 Forest. I mean, a clean sheet would be lovely. Again, it kind of, a lot of people would suggest You're not going to get clean sheets with Ange Postecoglou. So Matt Sells is going to have to cherish that golden glove because he ain't getting another one anytime soon. But hopefully that is the case, that we pick up a clean sheet tomorrow. I think that with our attacking players, that it's going to be 1-0 again, like you, Raf. I think that, Liverpool tried to break them down last week. Forest is still not going to automatically transform into a team that can destroy opposition just yet. I'm hoping that we'll build up to that. I certainly hope that we don't have another away defeat. We've conceded 3 goals in each of our last 3 games. And of course, that's bookended with the end of Nuno, the start of Ange, going to Arsenal, and the capitulation last night. So, we need to see Forest on the front foot, but we also need to see them making sensible decisions defensively as well. All right. We've gone into overtime as usual. I knew we would today because we were squeezing in 2 games. So as we approach the hour, 10 minutes mark, let me just quickly say to you guys that Talking Reds are now part of the Sports Social podcast network. So we have signed up with a really good partner, and we're going to be pushed out across a variety of platforms, continuing with Spotify and Apple, and now going into the likes of Amazon possibly, and Heart and other places as well. So it's an exciting moment for us to join up with the Sports Social Podcast Network. So if you are listening on Apple and Spotify, there might be 1 or 2 ads coming your way, but that is part of the deal, I'm afraid. So please stick with us and please bear with us. Danscape and Raf, 2 legends, 2 OGs. Thank you very much, as ever. As is customary, Richard Spray, for your final thoughts.
So I think Paul Morley is the guy who authored this analogy or metaphor. But I think this situation is just like the first goal that Igor Jesus scored, right? Get your legs taken out from you. You get back up immediately. You run down the pitch and you put one in the back of the net. And that's ultimately what Forest has to be right now. And I think we can do that. I think we've got the resolve to do that. So I'm very excited about watching this match. I may be less excited by the end of Saturday morning, but Saturday morning for me anyway. But I think we're going to do it. I think we're going to do it.
Okay. All right, guys. Listen, there's plenty to be positive about. Attacking play. We've asked for it last season that sometimes, we were too defensive and there's not a lot going on. And in the moments that we attacked with the Alanga moment against Man United, it was a brilliant moment. But surely, we've got to get on board with a more possessive based football, hopefully, and more goals hopefully coming for Nottingham Forest. Ange Postecoglou has barely been in the building a week or so. So, he's still getting accustomed to things, guys. Let's give him a chance. It's all going to be good. Come on, you ready?
Come join Greg and Richard.